Hello everyone, this is Richard from Modern Healthy Hong Kong, and welcome to the fourth and final in our series of interviews with Dr. Brian Kennedy of the National University of Singapore. In this video, Professor Kennedy covers lifestyle topics such as intermittent fasting and diet, as well as explaining how mTOR may behave as we age. I was happy to hear that alcohol is not all bad. And with that, let me start the interview. So, intermittent fasting. So do you have any advice on this? And do you intermittent fast? And do you think it should change as you get older? Is kind of one question that I had.
Walter Longo and I have been collaborators for a long time, and so full disclosure, I'm actually on the board of this company, which is called Nutra. And what they do is they make diets that mimic fasting. And they've been doing a lot of clinical studies with these fasting mimicking diets, and the data is quite promising. And I would say the data is promising for other forms of fasting too. So there are things like 5-2 diet, where you eat normally 5 days a week and then do something close to fasting for 2 days. I think something that people find more sustainable are time-restricted feeding, where you eat all of your food within an 8-hour window, or some people even a 4-hour window, which is hard, but an 8-hour window is achievable, and 12-hour window is certainly achievable. And I think that there's data accumulating that you get benefits from all of these things. I mean, if you go back and look at the calorie restriction studies in mice, so calorie restriction is reducing calories down to just above malnutrition, so you get everything you need and nothing else. And in a mouse, you can do that in a very controlled way. And when you do it, the mice live 30% longer. But the other thing to realize is that the ad-lib fed mice that have the food all day, they eat, mostly more at night than in the day, but they eat pretty much all the time in small doses. When you put the 60% of that food in for the calorie restricted mice, they eat it and it's gone because they're hungry. And so then they're fasting for like 12 hours until you feed them again. So even in those calorie restriction studies, there's a significant amount of fasting going on. And that led people to do every other day feeding studies in mice, and they showed that you can get much of the lifespan extension from every other day feeding, even though the mice eat almost twice as much food on the days they have the food. So I think there's a lot of data from animals and human studies that suggest fasting is good for you. I think it's a good way to get to ketogenesis. We talk about ketogenic diets. I think to me, a lot of it is how you get there, and fasting is a great way, a healthy way to get there. So I encourage people to try to do time-restricted feeding if they can. Don't eat all day long, but try to confine your period of eating within a relatively shorter window.
Do you have any advice on the kind of the macronutrient mix?
Yeah.
So too much protein, can you have too much protein? I mean, this is one of the things with keto.
People will disagree with me on this. I was in an argument with someone this morning about it. So so full disclosure, this is, there's a lot of different opinions out there on macronutrients right now. If you look at isocaloric diets in animal models, mice, and even things like flies and wasps, most of the data suggests that it's high carb, low protein diets that are associated with longer lifespan. Now remember, that's isocaloric, and it's complex carbs, not a bunch of sucrose, generally speaking. And those, are probably in a more sedentary state as well. So if you eat simple sugars, it's a good way to screw up your metabolic system. It's a good way to get excess calories. So I'm not here to say all carbs are good. Don't misunderstand me. But the low protein diets are more associated with longer lifespan in the animal studies. Now, I think when you get to humans, the one thing I don't like dramatically unbalancing your macronutrients. I think that may cause you to lose weight. It may, in some cases, be useful for muscle building. But over the long term, I think that I'm not sure it's a healthy strategy to go down for a healthy lifespan. So I encourage people to try to keep a balance of macronutrients, try to reduce simple sugars, try to eat a lot of green leafy vegetables, and try to, pay particular attention to red meat. But I think not have too much red meat, not have too much dairy. I think that it gets more complicated though, because we tend to do diet studies or we do exercise studies. We don't usually think about how the two interact with each other. And, I can tell this myself in some ways because I start, like during this lockdown, I went and decided to get back into very high levels of exercise. And my protein needs go up when I do that. So, if you're doing a lot of resistance training, especially in some cardiovascular training, you probably need a diet that has more protein in it. If you're very sedentary, you probably need to reduce your animal protein. So I think that to get these things right and to get them personalized, ultimately, we have to be able to measure someone's biomarkers. We have to understand their lifestyle. And try to develop diets that, first of all, they like and can sustain. It doesn't matter if I tell somebody to be vegan if they're not going to do it, right? And then also that we have to balance it based on their exercise and other kinds of behavior and any particular tolerances or lack of tolerance they may have to certain components of the diet. So I think the answer at the end of the day is going to be very personalized. Right now, I just try to tell people that keep your calorie count down to what's recommended. Keep your diet balanced, and try not to go too far down a dairy and red meat path, especially if you're not exercising.
Right. So, well, I guess a more detailed question. So, so one thing that, so I understand, like activating mTOR. We haven't talked about mTOR very much, but like activate. That's one of the things that proteins does. Right? Activating mTOR is generally bad, right? And wants to be
I don't think it's bad. Okay.
It's not bad. Okay.
I think these aging pathways are dynamic.
Mm.
And if you want to live a long time, you want to maintain them in a dynamic state. So when you exercise or you eat a meal, you want to turn TOR up. You use TOR for a reason to deal with the high nutrients and to do anabolic things in the cell, and that's good. When you have a wound and you need to heal the wound, you need to turn TOR up to heal that wound. The problem is when you're in a resting state, you also need to have TOR at a low level.
Right.
And I think what's happening with age is that the basal state of TOR is creeping up. And so we can't turn it off effectively. And so the problem is that you have TOR on all the time at that point, not just when it's supposed to be on. And what rapamycin, I think, is doing is restoring that dynamicity to the TOR pathway so that it's off when it's supposed to be off and it still can be turned on when it's needed to. And that's where you're getting the benefit from. And I think you could, at least from a hypothetical state, make that argument for a lot of other pathways too. Sirtuin levels are going down with age, and restoring them is probably a good thing. You probably don't want your autophagy pathways on all the time, but you need to turn them on when they're needed to get rid of aggregated proteins in the cell. And so again, it's dynamic range, I think, is what you have when you're young and everything is in equilibrium, and it's what gets lost as you get older. And if we can maintain that sort of homeostatic control, that's what's going to keep us healthy long.
Okay, right. Because where I was going with that is like sarcopenia, and because you need TOR, I guess, to help maintain and build your muscles as you get older.
The muscle field has sort of thought that the aging field is crazy for a while now, because a lot of the strategies for sarcopenia have been trying to increase AKT, increase TOR, and drive muscle growth, and they haven't really worked particularly well. But there's still a lot of motivation to do that, because those are the standard ways you build muscle. And what we're saying is that give rapamycin, at least to animals. They live longer, and by the way, their muscle's healthier too. And it may be because that keeping TOR low preserves the stem cells in the muscle, and it allows them to respond later in life and build muscle and repair muscle when you need to. But there's a big sort of, still confusion in the field as to what's going on there. I think that I'm not particularly excited about the idea of trying to force TOR on in sarcopenic state. I just think it's probably too late to have much of an effect. What we really need to be doing is preserving stem cell function and preserving muscle as long as possible in healthy people. And I hope some of these strategies will help people that already have sarcopenia as well. But again, I think you get into a different problem, and that's true with diet too. I mean, frail people, they're malnourished, right? They need more amino acids in their diet, because they're not digesting them particularly well, and they're not getting enough in their body. It's not clear how to do that really, but I would certainly not recommend a frail person go on a fasting diet, for instance.
Right.
And in fact, we saw that with the studies we did with Balter in the mice, that when you did the periodic fasting, which mimics what this L-Nutra product does for you to mimic fasting, when you did that in the mice, it really helped the mice throughout much of their lifespan. At the very end, however, it was bad. We had to take them off the diet because once they got frail, they're already not getting enough nutrition, and get periods of fasting or just making things worse. So that's why I think that once you're in a state of cognitive impairment or frailty, we're in a different ball game at that point. And we need to go back and look at these aging pathways and see which ones might be beneficial in that context. But the things that help healthy people that are not yet in that state may be somewhat different from what you need to do for people once they're in that state.
Yeah. So one thing that's close to my heart. So I saw one of your talks. You covered alcohol, and in particular, you said that up to 3 glasses, I think it was a day, was beneficial for men, and it was like 2 glasses for women. That sounds really good news to me. So are there any downsides? And could you just talk about that briefly?
This field, we can show beneficial effects of long-term ethanol administration in mice. We haven't published that data yet, but we have interesting data on that. If you look at the human data, it's all over the map, and it goes back and forth. I think that most people would say that low to moderate alcohol may be good for cardiovascular health, but there's like one group of people that are typically funded by people that study alcoholism, and they'll tell you alcohol is just bad, and their studies point to that effect. And then there's another group of people studying aging or cardiovascular system that say low to moderate alcohol is good, and their studies point to that effect. And it's a mess. My general feeling is that for people that don't have liver problems, that are not prone to addictive behavior, we all know that too much alcohol is bad, are not prone to addictive behavior. I think, and also that remember that alcohol is calories too. So if you, not just the ethanol, but the stuff that's in it with the ethanol, like in red wine or beer, so that's really empty calories you're getting when you drink that. So that's not the best thing either. But those things aside, I think if you can maintain a low to moderate consumption of alcohol, that my guess is it's probably protective over the long term.
Excellent. That's good. So for my final question, so what would you suggest for one thing that people could start doing today that would have the biggest impact on their health span? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, looking at some of these supplements is interesting. And for people that want to do that, they should. For people so that's one thing I'd recommend. I think the other thing, though, is that to really, start to evaluate where you are. Maybe this lockdown is an interesting time to do that because their lives got disrupted, and you can think about, what's going on with your lifestyle right now. And so I think that, again, I can tell people to be vegan marathon runners, but they're not going to do it. So the question is, how do you make sustainable changes in your lifestyle? And by that, I mean exercise, diet, stress management or mindfulness, and sleep. And how do you make those changes that you can adapt and do on a long-term basis? Because I think that for all of those things, we're pretty confident they're going to be beneficial for your health in the long term. And in the short term too, by the way. If you I've gotten back into, as I said, into pretty heavy exercise, and I feel better. I have more energy. I sleep better. It's not just what's going to happen to me 20 years from now. I'm seeing the benefits of that now. But it's all about sustainability. What happens is people say, I'm going to start exercising, and then they do something for a couple weeks, they get tired of it, they join a gym, they don't go, and then they get more stressed because they have less money. It's about sustainability, and particularly with exercise, that's important, because I think a lot of people find that there's kind of an activation barrier there. The first month or two when you start an exercise program, it's pretty difficult and frustrating, and then eventually you get over some barrier where you're exercising much more comfortably, and it actually, for me, I get my exercise and mindfulness at the same time. I go for long runs, and it clears my head. Especially, I tell people I go up that first hill, and at the bottom of the hill, I'm worried about all the things that are going on in my life. About 2/3 of the way up the hill, I'm worried about not dying. And then when I get over the hill, my mind's clear. So I think that that's how I achieve mindfulness too. But it all comes down to finding things you enjoy doing that you can maintain in your lifestyle. Because doing something for 2 weeks isn't going to affect it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's got to be something that you're happy to continue. So thank you very much. We're about out of time. So can you tell people where they could find more about your work and what you're doing, you and your lab?
Yeah. We have a website at NUS, and Ponce de Leon Health has their own website you can go look at too, and if you're interested in alpha-ketoglutarate, otherwise, you can find me at NUS if you just look on the website and reach out to me if you have questions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We will put links to those in the descriptions. So Professor Kennedy, thank you so much for your time and insights today. I do hope we get the opportunity to talk again in the future. Thank you all for watching. For us, the key takeaways from this video are that the time-restricted eating is a good way to get into ketogenesis, which has been shown to be beneficial for health. An interesting discussion on diets and macronutrients with a preference for high carb, low protein, but an understanding that not all carbs are good. That mTOR is not always bad. We need it to repair muscle and heal wounds even when we get old. It is a matter of maintaining mTOR's dynamic range. And that a healthy lifestyle should be something that you are enjoying and that is easy to maintain. I hope that you found the video and the rest of the series informative. We would like to extend our thanks to Dr. Kennedy for being so generous with his time and insights for us for these interviews. We're looking forward to seeing how Professor Kennedy's trials in Singapore progress. Please do hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell button for new video release notifications. It encourages us to continue to create more videos about anti-aging and extending healthy lifespan. Thank you so much for your kind support. I wish you all well, and we'll speak to you again soon.